Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. Last week, I visited the Almarai dairy farm in the middle of the desert in Saudi Arabia, where some 22,500 cows are milked every day. There I met Tony Gavin, a Tipperary man who's managing the farm. Tony, incredible scale at the Almarai Al Bidayah farm in the Saudi Arabian desert is where we are. 46,000 animals, 960,000 litres of milk coming off the farm every day. How does a man from the south of Ireland end up running such an enormous scale of something that, farmers going to dream of the scale of this size?
I suppose it all started off by doing the farmer apprenticeship back in Ireland and working on then in Macra for a few years before eventually coming out here in 95, starting off then as a unit manager covering all areas, the health, the breeding, the young stock, milking parlour, feeding, and then moving on to assistant manager covering 2 areas, and then progressing to farm manager where you cover all areas again.
But, and you guided us through, and you're very good to give us so much of your time over the past couple of hours, right from the 4 milkings a day, the young stock, the calves dropping every hour of the day and night and at all times. The level of logistics that's involved in getting a farm humming and ticking the way this one is.
Well, everything is fairly, on a day-to-day basis, everything is fairly similar. And we have 5 assistant managers looking after different areas on the farm, and under them they have unit managers. And once you can keep the standards, train the people to the standards you want, things should run smoothly. And
just take us through, what is a typical day on Al Bidayah farm?
Well, the milking, it is 24/7 here, and milking starts at 12 midnight, and we milk 22,500 cows, and they'll be finished by 5 a.m. Everything starts again, then day shift starts again at 6 a.m, and they're finished again at 11 washing. And again at 6 p.m. we're milking for the last shift of the day. There's 4 shifts involved in it.
And where does the milk, all that milk, where does that milk end up?
We just test the milk here for antibiotics, butterfats and SNF, and after that it's free to go to milk the factory after 3 hours once the Delvo is available.
And it ends up on shelves all across the...
Ends up in shelves, and within 48 hours of being processed it's on the shelves all over the Gulf, not only in Saudi, all over the Gulf.
And the challenges of operating such an enormous farm in the middle of the desert, is water an issue? Is the environment an issue? What are the big issues for you?
The big issue here is keeping costs down and increasing your yields year on year. Then we started off years ago that we would get cows peaking at 54 litres. Now if you don't get 60 litres of milk at 42 days, you're doing something wrong.
And the vision for the farm, where do you want those cows to be in the next 5 or 10 years?
We would hope to near the 15,000 litre in the next 5 or 10 years. We're slowing down expansion, so that should allow us to cull a few more, and then that will increase our yield per head, hopefully.
What has the expansion been, as just you talked about, over the past 5 or 10 years? Where does it come from?
Probably come from the growth in the market out here. We're probably expanded by 7,000 cows a year, so we're kind of breeding everything up to that, and that's slowing down now.
And the plan with you said you're going to introduce maybe some beef sires into that to try and help with fertility.
Hopefully we're using the bottom, taking out not breeding to the bottom 10% of the herd, so that should get rid of the poor yielders compared to before. 95% of things were bred just to help with expansion.
And what, if anything, can Irish farmers learn or pick up from the system, the enormous system that you're running here in Saudi
I suppose
Arabia?
The yields and the standards, between getting the heifers to breeding weight at 13 months and the yields that we're producing here, the 60 litres, even at 100 days of milk, we're still doing 55 litres, and 15,000 litres per head. There's nothing not achievable.
And give us a brief insight because there's nothing really grown on farm here at all. Everything is either shipped in from abroad or imported. You have alfalfa, you have hay, you have maize silage. Talk us through the logistics of where you get all your feed from.
I suppose the main ingredient for the diet would be alfalfa and maize corn. All the maize corn is bought in the States and transferred over by boat, and our own trucks bring it in here then by truck. The alfalfa up to now is all growing locally and mostly up north, up in Highland, up in Aljuf. That's between 500 to 800 miles away, and transported down for feeding. That'll change in 2018 when more of our alfalfa, or 100% of alfalfa, will have to be brought in from overseas.
And then finally, the calves. You keep on the heifer calves. You say they have to be 400 kilos and 135 centimetres for breeding. The bull calves, what do you do with those?
Bull calves are sold after 14 days to the local market. There's a veal contract there for local buyers.
And a message for farmers listening back home. What's it like? Give us a sense of what it is like to be farming. As we look around here, it's desert and desert and desert for miles and miles and miles. What is it like coming from?
I suppose there's tough conditions because we're so isolated out here. Though you're away from home, but now you have internet and you can see the paper. But in years gone by, it would have been a lot tougher. But saying that, there's nothing not achievable. Like, the yields that we're getting here, why can't someone at home do them? Like
the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app, and on iTunes every Thursday.
The presidential race at Macra Feirme is on. The two candidates in next month's election, James Healy and O'Deill Evans, have just started a series of hustings around the country. Peter Thomas Keaveney for the Farmers Journal was at the first debate in Carrick-on-Shannon on Tuesday night, and he heard from both candidates.
So we're here tonight in Carrick-on-Shannon after the first of 6 hosting debates. Tonight's debate was for the North West region, and I'm currently joined by one of the presidential candidates, O'Deill Evans. O'Deill, how did your first night go?
I think it went really well. The members posed some really, really good questions about what we're going to do as president. Some around broadband, Green Cert courses, as well as, general Macra competitions and things like that. So I think it went really well. I'm happy with how I answered them, and I think I've got good feedback from members afterwards.
What do you feel you can deliver as president of Macra Feirme?
So with this campaign I set out 3 main goals that I'd like to achieve over the 2 years, and it is a short space of time. So there are 3 really achievable goals, I think. So the first of all is to retain more young farmers as members of Macra. So a lot of them join when they do the Green Cert, when they do the leadership module, but they don't actively get involved in our clubs. So what I would like to do is to go around to each of the ag colleges, visit them, do a discussion group with the lads, give them the right first impression of Macra, tell them what Macra is all about, and if we can retain more of them, or even 50% of those, I think that would be something achieved as president. Second of all, given my background in the media, I'd like to promote the image of Macra to the wider public, and get the message about what we do out there to more people. And thirdly, I'd like to strengthen the work of the Rural Youth Committee by introducing county officer training for rural youth officers and strengthen what we do on that front.
That's brilliant. Thanks for your time. So we've heard from O'Deill, and now it's on to the second presidential candidate, James Healy. So James, how do you feel your first night went tonight?
I think once I got over the nerves of the early stages, I was quite happy with how the speech went, and I thought it was great to see such a crowd there with such an interest and having so many questions. That it shows that there's a great interest in what's happening amongst the membership, and it's great to see that those members that are going to lead our organisation into the future have that interest to show up tonight and see who they want to be the person to lead the organisation into the future. And that's what made me happiest, to see such a crowd there to actually educate themselves on the candidates.
That's good. James, what do you feel that you can deliver as president of Macra Feirme?
I suppose I said it tonight, that we tell it to our club officers all the time, that if you can hand over the club when you're finished in a better position than you got it, then you've done a good job. And I think that's the ethos that I want to take into, if I'm lucky enough to get elected, that I would take that ethos in. Obviously, I'd like to see an increase in membership, and particularly an increase in participation. Even if the membership level stayed roughly the same, once we have an increase in participation, it shows that more and more members are getting involved in what we're doing. They're taking advantage of what we're offering. They're getting the personal development out of the organisation. And if that can happen, then, and that's something I want to particularly push, be it through workshops or, pushing different competitions and find out what the members want and then bringing that through. If I can see that at the end of 2 years, then I'd be extremely happy.
That's great. Thanks for your time, James.
No bother.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
On Wednesday, the IFA launched its position paper on Brexit and established a dedicated team to deal with the issue. Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent Pat O'Toole was at the launch, and he spoke to IFA President Joe Healy.
I'm joined here by Joe Healy, the IFA President. It's on the occasion of IFA's launch of their Brexit policy document. It's called The Imperatives for Irish Farmers and the Agri-Food Sector. Joe, I suppose inside you synopsised the key findings into just 3 key elements. It's very important that Ireland maintains access to the UK market, that it's very important that market continues to be a high value market, and that the CAP must be fully funded post-Brexit. Is that the bones of it?
It really is. It can be synopsised down into that, and then it goes into the wider detail for each of the individual commodities, whether it's beef, the dairy side of it, pigs, poultry, sheep. But really and truly, what we want is minimum disruption to trade with the UK. Also that the value of the UK market will be maintained, and an adequately and fully funded CAP going forward, because I think it's important to point out, and a number of people maybe that are not from a farming background often says to me, CAP, it has served farmers well. But I point back to them that in the 1960s, when CAP was introduced, the household family was spending 30% of their average household income on food, whereas today they're spending 12% of their average household income on food. So I think CAP has served, for that, those people are getting safe, traceable, quality food produced to the highest standards. So CAP has served the European consumer as well as the European farmer pretty well, and I think that, it's vital that the CAP is adequately funded going forward.
Would it be fair to say that the anti-CAP brigade have lost one of their key voices with the defection of Britain from the EU? Because Britain has never fully been convinced by CAP, and certainly their politicians have often spoke of the need to curb the CAP budget and to move the aids away from direct support to farmers over to the environmental pillar. And in that scenario, at least countries like Ireland and France, who are strongly pro-CAP, may gain traction.
Yeah, you look, the point you make, it's a bit like, is the glass half full or half empty, or as the third lad said, why did they make the glass twice too big? We do talk about the UK being net contributors to CAP. I think to the European budget their net contributors of over 10 billion, but to CAP it's 6 billion that they contribute to CAP. Now 3 billion of that is paid back to UK farmers, so they're net contributors to CAP to the tune of 3 billion, which is obviously negative to see them move away from that. But on the other side of the coin, there you have a voice that has never been pro-CAP move away from the table, and it might be easier to defend the CAP than around that table with our allies in the other countries that you've mentioned. Last week we were at the NFU conference in Birmingham, and the Secretary for Agriculture there, Andrea Leadsom, spoke, and just to hear her express her dislike, and I'm being very polite there, her dislike for CAP was just incredible. It was an eye opener, and I was just imagining myself to have that voice at the table talking about CAP funding. You definitely hadn't an ally there. So while we are losing a net contributor to CAP, we're also losing a very negative voice towards CAP.
In terms of trade, you said earlier that anyone who was looking for silver linings was clutching at straws, that this is just going to be a very tough process. IFA have set what they believe to be Ireland's stall out, that Ireland is uniquely disadvantaged in the Brexit negotiations, that the Irish agri-food is by far the most exposed and vulnerable sector. What does IFA intend to do to try and protect the sector?
Well, first of all, it's about highlighting the importance of agri-food and, that unique importance of food to Ireland, and I suppose the huge importance of the UK market. That's why, we've this document launched today that anyone that goes through it will quickly realise how important the UK market is to the Irish agri-food sector. And I suppose to highlight the importance and the fact that no sector anywhere in Europe has the potential to be as badly affected as agriculture in Ireland as a result of Brexit. We've seen the effects of that already. Conservative figure, a loss of 150 million to the beef sector in the second half of last year. So we've also the rally coming up, the IFA rally in Goffs on the 24th of April, where we have the Commissioner for Agriculture, the Minister for Agriculture, politicians from all sides here in this country, the COPA Chairman Martin Merrill, and a host of other speakers. And that's to get our message across and to show the depth of feeling amongst not only Irish farmers, but indeed all sectors of the industry. The processors, the likes of Borbia, the meat factories, Ornua, the dairy co-ops. They'll all be there highlighting the importance, and I suppose also highlighting the impact and what a negative outcome to those talks and what a hard Brexit will mean for Irish agriculture.
Have we common ground with our counterparts, that is farmers in Northern Ireland, and to a lesser extent in Scotland? We have the report, which has been authored mainly by Rowena Dwyer. It shows the extent of cross-fertilisation north and south, how much trade goes across the border. Will northern farmers be as concerned about the possibility of a hard border as farmers in the Republic?
They are, and look, I think at farm organisation level they're very concerned. Look, let's be honest about it. At an individual farm level in Northern Ireland or the UK, the last 6 months has been positive for them. They've seen the value of their single farm payment increase as a result of devaluation. Also as a result of that, they've seen the price of their produce going up. And it's, as one of them said to me, it's kind of in the years ahead we'll see the cost of inputs go up as well as a result of our devaluation. He said we haven't fully acknowledged that yet, but I think, speaking to farmers that are involved in the Ulster Farmers Union and their president up there, Barclay Bell, they're hugely concerned, and they're concerned in the sense that agriculture just may not be a priority. And again, I'm being very mild there, at the cabinet table in the British Parliament. And what happens if there's trade deals done with other countries? They're very well aware of that they're in a lot better place if they're competing with the Irish or the French or indeed anyone from around Europe than they are if they're competing with the likes of the South Americans when it comes to putting cheap beef on the shelf. And they're afraid of any type of a cheap food policy, because they've invested a lot in their farming structures as well, to satisfy a customer that standards were set very high. And now if they're going to be competing where the standards just may not be as high and the same traceability, etc., is not required, well, they are worried about that.
Hey, is the British consumer a key player in this then? Because obviously standards are something that farmers, because of the costs of maintaining standards, will always look for equivalence in terms of imports coming into any European market, be it within the EU or without. But without the consumer on board, are we on a sticky wicket?
Absolutely are on a sticky wicket, and there's no point saying anything else. There would be a huge element in the UK that just might be just as happy and a lot happier value-wise with food that traceability may not be absolutely wouldn't be as well done as what's been produced in the UK. But I think the government needs to show responsibility here. The UK have a good name as food producers as well as the rest of Europe. They can't just walk away from that and run the risk of importing cheap food that, you never know what you're going to import if that sort of policy takes up.
Back home then, I suppose, rally on the 24th of April, but constant pressure, I would imagine, from IFA on politicians, not just here in Leinster House across the road, but all over the country, root and branch lobbying on behalf of Irish agriculture on this huge issue. You called it the most important issue in our lifetimes. And with that sense, is this going to be the defining issue of your presidency?
Well, look, an awful lot can happen and change. If I was talking to you last May, we'd probably be talking about Brexit, expecting that it wouldn't happen. If I was talking to you the 22nd of June, we'd probably be having the same conversation. So an awful lot can chop and change in the meantime. It's just another issue that the IFA has to deal with, no more than ANC or CAP or commodity prices or the retail food chain or trade deals. But it is a huge issue, and it's an issue that's not going to go away, and it's an issue that's going to stay there throughout my term. And I spoke to an ag science class in the local presentation college in Athenry last week, and I said to them, there are issues that I could talk to you here about that will be gone off the table, but I said you'll probably have gone through college and be out working the other side of it, and Brexit will still be a key issue, and negotiations might still be going on, and negotiations in trade deals might still be going on. So it's not something that's going to go away pretty soon, but all we can do is do whatever is possible at the moment to ensure that every politician is aware of the unique importance of Brexit to Irish agriculture, and that operates from the local politician right up through to the Taoiseach, to maintain it as a priority issue, and also our politicians, our MEPs and our Commissioner in Europe as well.
Joe Healy, thank you very much.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Staying with Brexit, the UK's former Agriculture Secretary Owen Paterson has given his vision of what British agriculture could look after Brexit. He met with our market specialist Phil O'Neill, who found out more.
Good evening. Joined by Owen Paterson, former Secretary of State in DEFRA, former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, and leading campaigner for the Brexit side of the referendum on EU membership. You this evening would have explained very clearly how you see a future for agriculture outside of the European Union. In fact, you see the European Union as a drag on British agriculture. How can you see it work for Northern Ireland in an era when we leave the support of the Common Agriculture Policy?
Well, the Common Agriculture Policy has failed completely. It was really set up as a food and social sustaining mechanism. Our self-sufficiency in food has tumbled from well above 70% to below 60%, and it is morphing since the McSherry and Fischler reforms from not building up unwanted subsidised mountains of grain or lakes of milk to some sort of pan-European environmental policy where it is failing again, as we all know from the diversification problems. So we happily will leave that behind us. We currently spend 20 billion in the European Union, and we get about 10 back, of which 2.9 is spent on our agricultural support system through the CAP. So there is plenty of money to play with. What we do is we address the fact that every citizen in the UK eats 3 times a day. We see how can we benefit them. They should have access to the best, most nutritious and cheapest food available. I'm absolutely confident this is a fantastic opportunity for the fertile, productive parts of the UK to fly. So with less regulation, less restriction, getting away from the absurd, hysterical aversion to any sort of risk or innovation from the European Union, we can bring in new technologies in every sphere of agriculture, and I am absolutely confident that our productive areas will prosper and will be well competitive and will have a great opportunity of exporting worldwide. You then have an enormous but in this sentence, but there will be parts of the UK, such as parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, parts of Shropshire where I come from. There will be still in the productive areas. I've got incredibly productive world-class farmers, but they have marginal land, and we have hill land. On that land, which has been maintained mainly by livestock farming for centuries, there's a landscape on which is based a 30 billion value tourism industry. There is also a whole structure of rural society and economy. So there is a clear justification for taxpayers' money to be spent helping those landowners who cannot compete at world prices.
So you see the same amount of money being spent, but in a different way. Is that correct?
We spend more if you want. I'm not fixing the amount of money. I mean, the Swiss and the Norwegians spend considerably more. The Swiss send very large numbers of livestock. I think it's 150,000 cattle or something like that, and 350,000 cows, up to the highest Alps, which on a food basis is mad.
But they the most protected agricultural market in the world. They don't accept imports.
But they provide a very valuable environmental function to such an extent that our Prime Minister likes to go there on holiday. And that is the contrast. So there's all sorts of outputs. There's not just the landscape, there's biodiversity, as we get in all the Pillar 2 schemes at the moment, but there's flood control, clean water, and I would chuck in all the rural assets you need for a sustainable rural society, such as broadband, proper mobile phone systems. Because people will not just be providing food in the countryside in the future. We're going to go from 7 billion people in the world at the moment, of whom 1 billion are hungry, to 9 billion, but the 9 billion will be fed by 2050 on an area of land size of India less. So there will be other activities in the countryside.
So you see the same or more money being spent, but in a different way, not for direct subsidy of agriculture. You mentioned New Zealand. Do you see it as the ideal model that we should aspire for UK agriculture in the years ahead?
Well, New Zealand was flat bust in the early 80s. They had a very, very heavily subsidised system of agriculture. So if you take their sheep industry, they were subsidising sheep to the extent of 88-90% of incomes. And they had 70 million, what they call sheep, raggedy woolly things, running all over the hills, doing terrible soil erosion, polluting the water, and they didn't know how to sell them. And they killed 6 million, one year they had to kill 6 million lambs, turn them into fertiliser. So, bang, a brutal crash, and we do not have to be brutal like New Zealand because we are not flat bust. We could do a transition, but bang, in New Zealand they stopped the subsidies. So today there are fewer than 30 million sheep, but they export more meat.
So that's
their
the
sheep
destination.
industry is 100% more efficient.
So that's the destination. It's just that we should have a more graduated process in getting
Food
there.
production should be left to the market. It should be left to technology. It should be left to the skilled of farmers to get the very best out of their land.
On the issue of technology, then, are you open-minded to accepting, for example, what's not accepted in the European Union? In fact, the WTO found against the European Union on the issue of the use of hormones in beef production. Would you visualise that a future UK beef industry could have access to the use of hormones?
I think there's all sorts of areas where the EU is hysterically averse to any sort of technology and innovation, and that's why it's becoming the museum of world farming, and it's falling further and further behind the rest of the world. So I was addressing a room mainly of males this evening. There's a lot of testosterone going around their veins. I did some work some years ago. I need to check it now, but at the time I looked at it, I found that German bull beef, with the entire bull calves and bullocks, not bullocks, bulls, had actually more hormone in it than injected American steer beef. I haven't met a single person who's come back from a holiday in America saying they're absolutely disgusted with American steaks and never going to eat them again. So I do think there's a bit of sense has to be brought into all these debates, and the industry here has to be very measured and decide what areas of technology they are going to adopt, or they should address why there is this opposition.
So the bottom line is UK agriculture has to aspire to be efficient at a global level.
Absolutely. And embrace the very latest technologies and get out there exporting on quality.
And the bottom line as well then is that UK consumers will have access to the cheapest food or amongst the cheapest food in the world if we don't have this super protected farming sector that we've had under the CAP.
Yeah, we leave the single market. And I point out that David Davis agreed with me in the Commons that more than 20 countries have accelerated their sales into the single market from outside faster than we have from within. We leave the customs union, which means leaving the common external tariff, which is Fortress Europe, and we allow the best and cheapest food to come into our country, which is an advantage to every single one of our 64 million human beings who eat 3 times a day. That gives us a massive 8 billion injection to the economy. We reckon that's worth about £305, according to Professor Minford, per family every year. You then say, right, what does that do for our farming and food industry? And do not underestimate the importance of the food industry.
Well, they have paid. They have paid for that. Surely they have created that windfall by virtue of the fact that we now have cheaper food.
They will all benefit. Every citizen will benefit. And then you say, right, how does that affect our farm industry? My contention is that large parts of our productive farm industry, the fertile areas, will prosper if government gets out of their hair. You get rid of the ridiculous regulation, the absurd aversion to risk, and you allow new technologies to be put into practice. You then say, fine, there are going to be still parts of the UK, might be parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, as I said, my own constituency, Shropshire, where you cannot compete on food production alone, but there is the enormous environmental benefit, there is a social benefit, there is a public benefit in the environmental work and the goods delivered, and there is a public benefit, for instance, on water control and flood control.
So now as it's about to become a reality, you're still as convinced that the UK will be much better off outside the European Union than it has been within?
Our farm industry, absolutely. Our environment, emphatically. It's a huge opportunity, and we need to grasp it.
Okay, Mr. Patterson, thank you very much.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
The government is preparing a series of schemes to support renewable energy this year. Farmers are hoping to contribute and benefit from this new market. Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent Thomas Hubert interviewed the Minister for Communications, Climate Action and Environment, Denis Naughton, this week.
I'm Thomas Hubert, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal, here with Minister Denis Naughton.
What I'm doing as Minister is putting the outlet in place. 2 outlets. One is a biomass outlet for electricity generation through our peat-fired power stations in the Midlands, and 2 large-scale industrial outlet for heat generated from biomass and potentially biogas as well. So I'm putting the outlet in place. I also have responsibility of establishing Bioenergy Ireland with Bordemona and Quilcha, so we will put the distribution network in place in relation to that, allow for the sourcing and transport of biomass. The final element of that is the establishment crops. We've already had preliminary discussions with the Department of Agriculture in relation to that. But the way we're structuring this is to try and ensure that the biomass that comes from sustainable production. So we are trying insofar as we can to ensure that this will support indigenous production rather than international transport of biomass.
Would that be through certain quality criteria
exactly.
that are more appropriate to the Irish crops?
Yes, well, it can't be purely to Irish crops. Naturally enough, we're in the European Union, but it will be structured in such a way that these are sustainable and traceable. So we will put as many standards in place that will be much easier for Irish growers to comply with than international growers.
The other aspect you're working on is electricity. And there is a support scheme you're working on. I think you're still planning to roll out this year as well. Could you tell us a bit more about where you stand there and what can, again, farmers expect as potential producers?
Yeah, so this is the Renewable Electricity Support Scheme, RESS. At this stage, what we're doing is we're doing an economic assessment of the different technologies. My intention is to make sure that there is a broader suite of technologies used for renewable electricity than would have been the case up to now. So up to now, all the eggs were pretty much in the onshore wind turbine sector. I want to broaden that out. I want to include solar. I want to include offshore wind and look at other renewable sources. How we actually structure those supports, there are a number of ways that we can tier that, whether we do it in phases. There are capacity issues in relation to the grid as well that have to be taken into consideration. So all of that has to be designed between now and the end of the year when we expect to have this scheme fully operational.
You've mentioned two things that are of particular interest to farmers: solar and grid connections. And we see at the moment a lot of farmers being approached by developers because solar takes space, asking for land, and there doesn't seem to be the grid connections available to support all those offers to farmers. Is there speculation and how can you deal with that?
Well, first of all, there aren't the grid connections, and I won't be paying for the grid connections to support this level of expansion, and I won't be subsidising it. So I think farmers need to be conscious of that, first of all. Secondly, I want to make it crystal clear that I am not going to allow, insofar as I can, a secondary market to develop as developed in the wind sector, where people were bidding for grid connections and people made a significant amount of money in relation to that. I have expressed my concern to the Commission for Energy Regulation in relation to this. I know it's something that they themselves are conscious of. It is a matter for the Commission for Energy Regulation, but it's one that I would have concern with in relation to what's going on at the moment. I do not want to see a secondary market created where people went in speculatively, looked for grid connections and then are using them to make a profit. If there's any money to be made out of that, that should go back to the Exchequer and not to people who are speculating in this sector.
Do you mean you're proposing legislation to tax those transactions?
Look, I don't know as of yet. I'm hoping that we can deal with it from a grid perspective because, look, the reality is if that money is generated in the first place, it's money that's been taken out of the economy. The consumer will ultimately have to pay for it. That's not my intention in relation to it. I don't think consumers should have to pay for that, but I'm not going to, insofar as I can, allow a secondary market to be created along the lines of the one that has been created up to now.
Okay, Minister Naughton, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday.
Thomas also spoke with a farmer with a long experience in the renewable sector who is now trying to start a solar farm. That's Michael Quirk from County Cork.
Hello, this is Thomas Hubert, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. I'm here with Michael Quirk, farmer from County Cork, who has a long experience in renewable energy. And maybe, Michael, could you introduce us to your farm and what you've done so far with renewables?
Yeah, I'm farming in a heada in Cork, which is on the harbour, on the eastern side of the harbour. Maybe 17 years ago we started a wind project. It took about 11 years to go from concept through to production. Now we've been in production for 5.5 years with 2 Enercon E48 turbines, delivering just short of 2 megawatts onto the grid in Cloyne. And at present now we're working through solar consents for a 5.7 megawatt solar project. We're queued on grid, and we've just received a grant of planning for 10 years.
So we'll talk a bit about the wind first. What kind of turbines are they? We know turbines could be an issue in some areas at the moment. Are you talking about big ones, small ones, and how did you manage to talk to your neighbours about that to get that accepted?
Well, at the time when we started our project, renewable energy was a super positive thing to be involved in. I mean, it was an exciting technology. It looked like green energy was the way and was the future. We went through planning without any objection at the time. And when we went through solar planning, we didn't have any objections either. So we just reckoned if local people had a problem with our turbines, it would have shown up in our solar. But at the same time, we're very closely involved with the Hada Community Council, and we're also hoping that the community renewable that the white paper announced will happen, and that there will be some sort of community involvement, community ownership or community benefit from our solar project.
A few years into the completion of the wind project, how do you rate it? Is it profitable? Is it something you're happy with?
Oh yeah, I'm very happy with it, yeah, but it took a big chunk of my life to do it. But I'm glad I did it. But halfway through, if you ask me, I would have preferred to have abandoned it. But we're there now, so onwards and upwards.
No regrets.
No regrets, no.
And now you're looking at solar, and you just said you're queued in terms of getting a grid connection. What does that mean? And I think it's a bit of an issue. So how is that working at the moment?
Well, the grid system works on date of application for grid. I sent in my grid application in 2015. I think I'm 20th on the list in the country, but still I'm looking at a long wait for process and connection, maybe up to 2020 at pretty high cost. So the grid thing is difficult. It's difficult for everybody. I'm hoping that at some stage when the new consultation process goes through, that they may connect planning to grid, and that will maybe organise the whole queue in a better way, in a more manageable way, and maybe that the solar stuff down south will work out better than all over the country, because the sun tends to shine better down south than it does up north. So we're hoping that the concentration of processing might happen down south rather than all over the country.
There are a lot of farmers who are being approached at the moment by developers to build solar farms. You're trying to go it yourself. Do you have any tips or advice from your own experience on various options that might be presented to a farmer who's interested in solar?
Well, yeah, the issues have moved and changed, but the issues for anybody signing an option or an exclusivity or a lease are basic. What's going to happen to your basic payments? Are you in the GLAS scheme? And then there's the big thing is the agricultural relief, your loss of agricultural relief. I did a thing in Portlaoise last summer for IFA about solar, and my take on the whole thing is I would hope as many farmers as possible who have signed some contract or another, I think there's 20,000 acres under contract now, would hopefully get some sort of equity in the projects that are on their land, because the equity is really where the value will be at the end of the day and not in the rent.
So basically you're accepting that you won't get agricultural tax relief, you won't get payments, and in exchange you say you should get equity in that, a share in the actual profit of the project rather than just maybe €1,000 an acre rent or something like that.
Well, no, I'm not accepting that there won't be agricultural relief, but at present there isn't agricultural relief, so people need to be careful of the timing of their signing. I mean, if agricultural relief does come in the next finance bill, for instance, are they going to retrospectively apply it to contracts signed before that date? So that's where people need to be really careful about what they're signing.
A lot of uncertainty, isn't there?
Oh, there's huge uncertainty, yeah.
And finally, in terms of going forward, you're waiting for your grid connection. What else do you need to make solar work on your farm in the future?
Well, for a small guy like me in the whole system, what I really need is a feed-in tariff. I mean, the larger developers are looking for an auction-based system, but an auction-based system is a very costly system to apply for, and there's no guarantee of success. If community solar, and by community solar I mean farmers, community groups, landowners, are going to get involved in this whole distribution power, some sort of a feed-in tariff would be very welcome.
So you're talking about a guaranteed price you can sell your electricity at when you feed the grid?
Yeah, there are savings. But with a refit, it's clear, it's understandable, banks like it, it makes sense, it's over a period of time, it's related to the inflation rate at a particular time, it's a lower due diligence cost on the project, and it's all positive really.
Well, how much would you need to get to make small-scale solar work on a farm at the moment?
Well, we don't know, because we don't really know what the cost of the panels are going to be. It depends on what happens, the minimum import issue with China and stuff like that. But maybe I would be hoping for something north of 12 cents per unit.
Okay, so it's still a bit of a gamble. You don't know all the figures and you have to plan ahead anyway.
Well, nobody knows, but there's still 5 gigawatts of power lined up for the solar queue, so I'm not the only person gambling, put it that way.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Finally, if you're having trouble hearing this podcast, you might be suffering from hearing loss. There's a full roundup of the problems and solutions in the health pages of this week's Irish Country Living. Consumer editor Ciara Leahy has more details.
Hello, this is Thomas Hubert, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. I'm here with our consumer editor with Irish Country Living, Ciara Leahy. And Ciara, this week you have a must-read if any reader is suffering from hearing loss.
Absolutely, Thomas. In this week's Irish Country Living, we actually have a 3-page special giving advice to readers about hearing loss and hearing aids. First of all, I suppose it's tackled by our health correspondent, Margaret Hawkins. She focuses her health article this week on, why getting a hearing test is so important, what it actually entails. And you'd be surprised how many people it actually affects, Thomas. By the age of 50, 20% of people have hearing issues, and by 65 that increases to 1/3 of people. So it's a very important health issue that affects a lot of people. Another very interesting read is our features editor Maria Moynihan. She has a case study where she interviewed a vet called Shona Maguire. She's working in Barryvale Veterinary Clinic in Carlow. She has a really interesting story. This lady actually suffered with hearing issues since she was a child, and she struggled at school as a result. This made her work even harder though, and she got into UCT veterinary school, even undergoing major ear surgery in her final year. I suppose what's really interesting though is because Shona has had hearing issues for many years, she's also been using hearing aids for quite a long time, and can bring with this through the advancements that she's seen in recent years.
Yes, because there have been advancements. It's not like the old, maybe big systems we've seen years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, and the thing is, it's such an important purchase as well. It's a life-changing purchase. I mean, we make purchases every day, but this one can make a real difference. I mean, suddenly a night in a restaurant with friends means you can actually get involved in the conversation without straining. Relationships with family members improve. You don't have to ask the same question over and over again, and they're not repeating themselves. Even watching a movie takes on a whole new dimension, and definitely over the years, the increase, how hearing aids have actually improved has made a massive difference into how life-changing this purchase is.
Also a big purchase from a financial point of view. They aren't cheap, are they?
No, absolutely not. And there's a huge price range. I mean, we literally came across figures from €500 to €5,000.
Wow.
So, I mean, it really is, across the board. But I suppose when you go up in price, you're getting different types of technology, and the choice consumers now have is remarkable. I spoke to Kay Lewis, who's owner and senior audiologist in Audiology Medical Service. And I mean, what was really interesting in speaking to her is the amount of factors that come into the purchase. You would expect that the extent of your hearing loss is what would be the major consideration, and it is an important consideration, but it's not the only determining factor. I mean, what Kay said to me is what people really need to bear in mind when making this very expensive purchase is their lifestyle. For example, you could have 2 people who have the same level of hearing loss. One person could live quite a sedentary life, is at home a lot, maybe goes out once a week, has a small family. The other person could work part-time, love going to restaurants, has grandchildren over for dinner every Sunday. I mean, these 2 people might have the same hearing issue, but the quality of the hearing aid that they're going to purchase is going to be completely different.
So then, what kind of different technologies can suit those different needs?
As you were saying earlier, look, you've got the behind the ear option, you've got the more discreet ear option. One of the new success stories at the moment is where batteries can be recharged. So you just like your mobile phone, so you don't have to take the batteries out of the hearing aid. There's a lot less messing around. Another option now is a company called Lyric. They have a hearing aid which is actually inserted into about 4mm from your eardrum, and that stays in place for 12 weeks. And as Kay said, this is a really important advancement for people with dementia who might actually forget to put in their hearing aids, and can be and it can be an issue for security at night if they're living on their own, or a fire alarm. And I suppose then some of the more kind of quirkier but I suppose very interesting ones is you've got stuff like a mini mic. So for example, if you're going to a really loud event and you're going with one person, they have that mini mic, so there might be a lot of background noise going on, but you can hear exactly what that person is saying that you're accompanying.
So that sounds great even if you don't have hearing loss, actually.
Yeah, exactly. There's another thing called a Roger pen, which is really discreet. It looks just like a pen. It sits in the middle of a table, so if you're a business person that has hearing issues and you're going into a board meeting and you can't hear everything that's going on, I mean, that can be extremely frustrating and can affect your career. I mean, you literally just place that pen in the middle of the table and you're going to hear everything. And then the last one that I thought was very interesting is you can actually get wind noise reduction. So look, if golfing is your life and that's how you enjoy spending your time, I mean, this is a feature that you really put a value on.
Now, there are a lot of added extras there, but they would probably add to the price.
Mm-hmm. They do add to the price, but when looking at the price, Thomas, I suppose the last thing to consider is looking at what's included in the price, right? If you're just looking at a hearing aid, look, you can buy a hearing aid off the internet. What you need to look at is other factors, additional factors. What tests are included in your consultation? Does the price include fitting and verification of your device? Does it include follow-up care? What are batteries included? What's your warranty? All these are important elements that you need to consider when making your purchase.
Okay, thanks, Ciara. And there's a lot more about the government supports and everything you can get in this week's Irish Country Living.
Thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.